Hello, and welcome to Picture This, a podcast from the photo archives of the Albuquerque Museum. My name is Jill Hartke, and I'm the Digital Archivist here at the museum. Today we are cooking up history with some bizcochitos. In the United States, 34 states have an official food. Many have a state dessert, a state vegetable, or a state fruit. Maine has an official state sweetener in its maple syrup. Massachusetts made the Boston cream donut its official donut. And Oklahoma has an entire official state meal. But New Mexico was the first state to have an official cookie. In the Albuquerque Museum is a letter from Governor Gary Carruthers to Frances Maldonado congratulating her on the successful adoption of a state cookie. Here's the story behind the letter. The bizcochito is a New Mexican specialty, but to try to settle upon a single recipe or a single mode of creation is a fool's errand. But if you take some flour, eggs, salt, lard, sugar, anise, cinnamon, some juice or maybe some wine, some baking powder, maybe some milk, perhaps a bit of vanilla, well, the list goes on and on. Sometimes the ingredients are mixed with an electric mixer and then rolled and cut out with cookie cutters. Or maybe it's expertly mixed by hand and molded into shapes. However it's created, a bizcochito is meant to be a crisp butter cookie that gets dusted with sugar, cinnamon, and anise. Oftentimes the cookies are cut or molded into shapes like a fleur-de-lis or a cross, but other times are left simply as circles or diamond shapes. This cookie has a long history, going back much further than statehood. For centuries, the bizcochito has been a part of New Mexican cuisine. Priests and merchants report being given a toasted bread called bizcocho by Hispanic New Mexicans and also a similar bread traded by Pueblo people. The bread was used as a bartering good along the Santa Fe Trail and El Camino Real. It was good for travelers because it could last a long while, and if you dipped it in water or coffee, it became soft. Still, this was more bread than cookie. As spices like anise seeds from Spain and different types of sugar and cinnamon became more widely available, variations on the bread began to turn it into sweeter bread and cakes, and then into what we recognize now as our bizcochito cookie. Despite its nods to flavors from Spain, you'd be hard-pressed to find bizcochitos for sale in Europe. Like much of New Mexican cuisine, the cookie is considered to be a blend of indigenous, Spanish, and Mexican influences. Families put their own spin on recipes depending on the occasion, their own family traditions, the weather, their mood. Depending upon who you ask, the ingredients can vary, but it is generally accepted that anise seeds give the cookie its signature spicy flavor, and most people agree, albeit sometimes reluctantly, if you don't use lard, it's not a bizcochito. These variations in no true recipe for a bizcochito might be the reason why it's difficult to find them outside of New Mexico. Often people who move to New Mexico have never heard of the cookie, let alone tasted one. But to have a single official recipe for a bizcochito would be a tragedy because it is the enormous number of variations and the ties to family heritage that make it distinctly New Mexican. Children often learn how to make bizcochitos by helping their parents and grandparents in the kitchen in an annual tradition of family togetherness and food. The cookies are often made for special events like weddings and baptisms, but they are most popular during the Christmas season. Around the state, you will find families sharing bizcochitos with each other and their neighbors to celebrate special occasions. It is this experience, the creating and sharing of food across generations, that led to the adoption of our official state cookie. The effort was spearheaded by a 28-year-old Albuquerque woman named Frances Maldonado. Maldonado herself was famous for her version of the cookie, whose recipe was passed to her from her grandmother, and which she named Josecitos Bizcochitos after her father. She served them up at her cafe, Enchantment Delights, located at 414 Romero Street Northwest in Old Town, Albuquerque. Like many families, the Maldonado family had a secret ingredient in the recipe that Frances wouldn't share with outsiders. She believed the bizcochito was not just a holiday treat, but a larger symbol of the traditions and culture of New Mexico. Frances Maldonado lobbied heavily to have the cookie officially recognized as a symbol of the state. She sent letters and samples of her bizcochitos to lawmakers. She persuaded 3 of them to write a bill and present it in the Roundhouse. Representatives Edward Sandoval, Francis Armijo, and Henry Kiki Saavedra sponsored the cookie bill in 1989. Sandoval introduced the bill as a fun way to promote tourism and preserve Hispanic traditions. He said he'd already gotten requests for a recipe from people around the country wanting to try the New Mexico cookie. It may have seemed to be a light-hearted bill, but the adoption of the cookie was not without debate. The controversy began when the dictionary was found to spell the word with a Z, but legislators' grandmothers spelled the word with an S. The House of Representatives decided the best thing to do was to allow the cookie to be spelled either way, so as to avoid family arguments. However, when the bill arrived in the Senate, the debate rose again. The Senate gutted the House recommendation and said jokingly that it was a disservice to the cookie's reputation by spelling the name 2 ways as if it were a villain that needed an alias. Back and forth, the debate went between the House and the Senate, almost requiring the cookie bill to go to a committee to decide upon the proper spelling. But in the end, the legislators sided with the dictionary, and the official spelling of our state cookie is bizcochito with a Z. In March of 1989, New Mexico became the first state to declare an official state cookie. Once it left the Roundhouse, the debate swirled in letters to the editors in newspapers, readers weighing in on the proper way to spell the name of our now official state cookie. The news spread, and the story was picked up by news outlets around the United States. People began asking for recipes, and Frances Maldonado ended up closing her cafe in Old Town and spending her time making 6,000 bizcochitos a day for distribution around the country. Her efforts were rewarded when she was thanked by legislators near and far for bringing New Mexico good publicity and honoring the ways in which families celebrate and spend time together. Thank you for joining us for Picture This with the Albuquerque Museum. Please join us next time as we look at another photograph from the museum's collection.